Hello, everyone. It's indeed a pleasure to be part of the Jubilee celebrations of IACCP. I'm Professor Roomana Siddiqui from the Department of Psychology, Aligarh Muslim University, and I'm presenting a paper entitled Cultural Reappropriation and National Identity in the Age of Communication Technology. And the session in which I'm presenting is an invited symposium by Professor Sylvia Chan, and it is entitled How Social, Political, and Environmental Challenges Affect Cultural Change and Individual Ideology, Asian Perspective. At the onset, I would like to thank Professor Sylvia for inviting me to be part of this symposium and to contribute to the 26th IACCP convention, which happens to be the Golden Jubilee celebrations. Now, national identity and cultural practices have always played a very significant role in defining a nation, as culture serves as a repository of all the lived experience and practices with which people strongly identify. Hence, nations have always sustained themselves by using these cultural heritage as an anchor for defining who they are and how they are different from others. Now, traditionally, national identity was territorially bound and dependent on how the leaders basically articulated them. But the forces of globalization and the neoliberal economy, they have completely changed the dynamics of nation states. And especially in the age of social media, cultural practices that define nationhood cannot exist in isolation, as it constantly interacts with global cultures. Now, prior to globalization, national identity was flexible and heterogeneous, as the presence of diverse ethnic identities defied any uniformity in representing the national identity. Now, when we look at the national identity profile of India, it is clear that due to the presence of diverse groups, the country was known for its rich cultural heritage and resources. Though these groups were different, they evolved differently in the social space and they were hierarchically placed, but despite the differences and the differences in the power sharing, they still coexisted with each other. And this was seen as a natural phenomenon. So historically, the national identity was a composite identity consisting of all diversity that coexisted. Now, postmodern, post-globalization India depicts another scenario. The concept of the composite Indian identity got transformed drastically, and the seed of this development can be traced to the partition of India, which was done on religious line. So, post-partition, the national identity of India has a very important component of religion and belief in it. So over the years, what we have seen is several transformations have taken place, and there have been realignments of identity along religion, caste, and language concern. Now, in recent years, culturally inspired nationalist movements have gained prominence, and there's an attempt to reappropriate certain cultural practices, artifacts, and myths to define the social identity. Now, currently, the national identity is based on the premises that Indian culture is coterminous with the Hindu culture, which happens to be the majority religious community in the country. Now, revival of cultural tradition and selective presentation of historical fact is done in a way that strengthens the collective identity with the national community. Reconstructing the historical myths and narratives basically strongly appeals because it clearly satisfies people's need to identify with a group and delineate us from them. So the cultural project becomes basically a means to include some people and to exclude other people. This process of othering basically is generally done by the majority group, and those people naturally who are not part of the majority group, they form the other. And othering as a common process basically implicates exclusion, and it allows the powerful to maintain their dominance over the other. Now, cultural symbols which are strongly linked with the system are powerful tools for swaying large masses. And the new narrative of national identity basically tries not only to reappropriate culture and religion, but there's an attempt to restructure them in such a way that it very well defines the other. Now, over the period, especially in the contemporary times, there has been a rightward shift in the country. But when we analyze it, it appears to be clearly part of a wider trend of the nature of nationalism is being redefined and identity is being renewed. The way like nationalism is being redefined and cultural identity is being given renewed emphasis. This often results in a reactive power dynamics operating within the national framework with the explicit aim to assert traditional norms and values. Now, the dynamics and process of identity constructions gets facilitated by the advancement which we are seeing in the field of communication technology, especially the social media with its outreach, because the reach of social media is in far-flung areas, even in remote areas, which previously this was not the case. So as the cultural narrative is well orchestrated on the social media, it plays an irreplaceable role in constructing the national identity. Now, media has broken through the physical limits of time and space, because now the audience's sense of collective participation can get reinforced unprecedentedly, because the visuals, the speeches which they are seeing 24/7 basically are powerful means for forging that identity. Now, images of the Indian citizens are circulated far and wide, and this reinforces the stereotype that articulate the politics of cultural identity. Now, technology helps not only in selectively reappropriating culture, but it also helps in sustaining the national identity. So in a way, we can say media basically sets the standard, or it can be a vanguard of the identity, which has been articulated by the leaders. So citizens today are largely under the influence of the mass media and are submitted to their power. And this is not so because individuals are passive recipients of all the messages that are being beamed by these televisions or the messages which people receive through the social medias. But basically, one can see media has the power to select the issues that they are going to take for discussions. So in a way, they have this power and the capacity to impose their agenda on the public sphere. So this agenda setting is decided with the explicit purpose of the appeal that it has for the masses, and it is done in such a way that it is easily received by the public. So this is one of the main reasons why politicians today use the digital platform, particularly television and social media, to address the nation, because while they are using these platforms, even if they are physically located in one space, they can reach out to a large geographical terrain. So in the present times, what we are witnessing is that the cultural projection for nation building is becoming instrumental in gaining power. So we could say, or we could conclude that cultural reappropriation for the sake of defining national identity is also a social identity that is politically manageable and usually exploited so as to mobilize people towards certain political ends. Thank you. And I would like to invite any questions from your side.